Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. In this segment, I want to tell one story of consensus science being very, very wrong. And people died unnecessarily for decades because of it. I want to do this because yesterday we talked about the history of consensus science. And it's not a history to be proud of. And my argument was, and is, that eventually, nearly all of the consensus science today around COVID will be proven wrong. I can say that because consensus science has nearly always been proven wrong. It takes decades sometimes for the consensus to change, but eventually it crumbles. And this will too. We're already starting to see some things crumble, from washing down surfaces to eating outside. Eventually masks will be proven useless as well. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who was all in on COVID, former head of the FDA, he wrote he's still for the lockdowns and all this other stuff. He wrote an editorial in the Wall Street Journal the other day about how masks don't do anything. He said cloth masks offer maybe 10% protective, which is a weird, because what does that even mean? Protective. Protective of what? In what environment? For how long? In what circumstance? Of what distance? What viral load does it protect, coming at you? And what viral load does it protect if you have from leaving your mat, right? So that sentence doesn't even make any sense. But he said scarves and bandanas are 10% protective. A good cloth mask is 30% protective. And a high quality, properly fitting surgical mask is 60% protective. But he makes the point that just because it's blue and it looks like a surgical mask that doctors wear doesn't mean it actually is a surgical mask that doctors wear. There's different levels and qualities of surgical masks. And if you get one on Amazon, it's probably not the same one that doctors actually wear. So it's nearly all theater and superstition and virtue signaling, and it's consensus science, and you can't dare question it. So the question is, why do people go along with this? A couple of reasons. First, no one likes to admit they're wrong. Second, people's professions and status and prestige and livelihoods are often tied to a particular train of thought. And to abandon that or to change your mind could be a disaster professionally and, of course, monetarily. And then third, no one wants to be accused of being a terrible person. Right? This is why, as we talked about yesterday, so many scientists went along with Carl Sagan's goofy nuclear winter formula. The science was atrocious, but who wants to be in favor of nuclear war? The science today is terrible, but who wants to be in favor of killing grandma? The science is atrocious, but who wants to be accused of being in favor of millions of people dying from COVID, right? So that's why, although the nouns and verbs change, right, the circumstances change, the story is still the same, because people are always the same. Every time I bring up this kind of stuff, I always get an email or something, and people are like, "Oh, what, Slater? What are you, some sort of doctor?" No, but I'm a student of history and of human nature. People, and that never changes. That never changes. People don't like to admit they're wrong. When their livelihoods are on the line, and if there's a risk of being said, "You want to kill grandma?" People are going to step up. I mean, look at Scott Atlas, right? Scott Atlas is a doctor at Stanford, highly revered doctor. And then he went and he worked for Trump as an advisor, made some completely reasonable comments about COVID, asked some completely reasonable questions, and was just eviscerated. The entire faculty at Stanford rebuked his existence because he dare come out and work for the evil tyrant Donald Trump. Right? This is what you're faced with if you challenge the consensus. And this is what it's always looked like for all of human history. So I mentioned this one story in passing yesterday, and I want to share the full of it here. This is just one of many, 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 many stories we could share, obviously. It's the story of pellagra. Pellagra was a disease in 1900, and the consensus was that it was caused by a germ. So we got to go out and we got to find this germ, and we got to kill this germ because it's infectious. But Dr. Goldberger came in, and he said, no, it's not caused by an infection, it's caused by bad diet. This was a terrible disease. It caused dementia. People were put in insane asylums because of it. Diarrhea, a horrible skin rash, and it was terrible. It could kill you. There were 3 million cases, and 100,000 deaths from pellagra, right? So this doctor had to prove that it was caused by diet. He had to go against the consensus. So what did he do? He went to orphanages because there were all these orphans who were dying and sick with pellagra. So he went to these orphanages and he started feeding people, these kids, real food. And all the pellagra was cured. He went to an insane asylum and he started feeding people real food. And people's dementia was cured. Okay, so he could prove, he took these people with a bad diet, gave them a good diet, pellagra was gone, all right? But now let's take people with an otherwise okay diet who are otherwise healthy and let's give them a bad diet and see if they get the pellagra, right? Let's prove it in the other way around. So how do you do that? He went to the governor of Mississippi and he said, hey, Gov, I want 12 prisoners, all right? Give me 12 of your prisoners who are otherwise healthy. I want to put them in an isolated, clean cells so there's no chance of an infection coming in, right? I'm going to feed them a typical Southern diet, lacking nutrients, and I want to see if they get pellagra. And the governor said, sure, that sounds great. Now, at the end of the experiment, the prisoners would be pardoned for their trouble. So at first, these prisoners, they were over the moon. They got away from the rest of the prison. They got these clean cells, brand new, clean as a whistle cells, and they got to eat all the biscuits, gravy, grits, and molasses that they could eat. It was wonderful. But after a few months, they all started to grow weak and pale, and they started drooping, and they started getting rashes. And a few more months, and they could barely walk. One of the prisoners said, I've been through 1,000 hells. Another asked just to be shot and have the misery stop already. After 7 months, they all got pellagra, and then they got a pardon, $5 and a new suit. Thanks for participating. It was proven beyond any doubt that pellagra was caused by a bad diet. Because look, we cured people with it by giving them a good diet, and then we caused people to have it by giving them a bad diet. And Dr. Goldberger was thrilled. He's like, yes, I finally proved it. We've solved this disease and we can fix this. We know how to do it. Isn't this wonderful news? So clearly the consensus said, oh, wow, we were wrong. Thank you, Dr. Goldberger, for showing us the error of our ways, right? Of course not. What did the consensus say? Who does this Yankee think he is, coming in here and telling us we're poor and backwards? I should have mentioned that most of the people with pellagra were in the South. And what Goldberg didn't realize is he wasn't just making a comment on Southerners' diet. He was highlighting their poverty. He was highlighting their backwardsness. He was critiquing and criticizing their way of life. And that wasn't taken kindly. Because why did Southerners eat so poorly? Why they eat molasses, like grits, and fatback. That was it. Why? Because it was cheap. And back then, cotton was king, and poor people would grow cotton all the way up to the front porch, and they would leave no room for vegetables. And that's what they had to do to survive. And this Yankee's gonna come in here, he's gonna come down here and tell us that we're living wrong, that we're doing it wrong. He's gonna come down here and tell us it's our fault. No, it's caused by a germ. It's no one's fault. It's a germ. And the more Goldberger proved that it was caused by diet, the more the consensus dug in their heels and said it's an infectious disease. It's unrelated to poverty. How dare you? How dare you even say it's right? It was Goldberger's blaming the victim. How often do we hear that today? So Goldberger wasn't going to give up. So what he did is he started what he called, or what has been known as, filth parties. This is 1916. 17 people, they were doctors, other doctors, and his wife and him. They collected blood and the scabs from the skin and stool samples from pellagra patients. And they put themselves in a room and they injected the blood. They swallowed these capsules filled with the scabs from pellagra patients. They did nasal swabs from like disgusting. Literally, like how foul is that? And afterwards, he said, if anyone ever got pellagra this way through an infection, we would get it. I think he said we would have it good and hard. We just feasted on filth. That's why they're called filth parties. And he didn't get it. If it was any other infectious disease, then he would have gotten it, but he didn't get pellagra. So clearly that's going to convince everyone, right? Nope, still didn't. Luckily, he didn't give up. So he worked hard to find the exact nutrient that was missing in people's diet, right? Instead of just saying, eat more vegetables, he tried to find the exact thing that was missing, and he found it. It was niacin, known as vitamin B3. And that was it. I think he made up a pill. It was like baker's yeast or something, like a nothing little pill. And that was it, gone. 30 years, all right? 30 years it took. Do you see, and in the face of overwhelming evidence, do you see the power of consensus? It's like a hypnotic power that consensus has over people. Because it's not about the medicine, it's not about the science, it's not about the proof, it's not about the facts. All those things can be rock solid against the consensus. That's not the concern, it's human nature that's the problem. And human nature never changes. People are stubborn, people don't like to admit they're wrong, and when livelihoods are on the line, surely there were scientists and doctors who made a living treating pellagra patients as if it was an infection. And they weren't going to admit that they were wrong. They had families to feed too. So that's why I say, and I could share dozens of stories like that. That's why I say, people, what are you, a doctor? No. But when you know more and more stories like that, and you see the pattern, it's all the same. We think we're so much better. COVID's the same thing. It's a matter of time before nearly all the science crumbles. History also repeats itself with gold. Thousands of years, for all of humanity, empires have fought wars over gold. It's always been a value, it always will be. Even more when Congress passes another $1 trillion COVID relief bill that I was reading about yesterday. Right? Why not, right? Trillion here, trillion there. And the stock market's gonna jump, right? Because everyone's gonna be fat and happy. And no one, except for you, is paying attention to the value of the dollar, which is falling every day, more and more so with $1 trillion spending bills. The hedge against this is gold. Value of the dollar goes down, value of gold shoots up. And you, just like the greatest kings in history, can own it. Or you know what, things are fine. Whatever, unprecedented government spending, unprecedented debt, no problem. I don't think it's fine. That's why I bought gold and silver. If you got any questions, 1-800-798-4260, 1-800-798-4260. It's Patriot Gold Group, patriotgoldgroup.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I want to talk about the Great Reset. Jesse Kelly is doing a special on this tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern, so please tune into that. And people have been throwing this around, this Great Reset, and it sounds conspiratorial, doesn't it? Right? It sounds like something you'd hear about from an email forward or some weird internet message board that looks like a spam site from 2004 or something. So I got a pretty good ear, a pretty radar for conspiracies, and I try to stay away from them. And this one, it just sounds like the name of it is just too cute. It's too on the nose, right? I think that was my thing. That can't be real. No way would George Soros call it the Great Reset. There's no way that's. But then, this is the front page of the World Economic Forum website, and you're you're doing this, huh? This is the thing. Speaking of Jesse, it was his line, and I've stolen it, that the lockdowns will not end until you end them. That's 100% true. The lockdowns will not end until you end them. And the longer they go on, and I know how this sentence sounds, bear with me here. It's in my brain before I say it, and I'm aware of what it is. The longer these lockdowns go on, the more the global elites, see what I'm saying? Not a great line. The more the global elites are going to use this opportunity to usher in what they call the Great Reset. Now, to be fair, before I go on and tell you what this Great Reset is, I would like to do this too, but if the default position of the world and of our nation was to have a conservative bent, then let's reset. There's a lot of things I'd like to reset in our world. I'll give you an example. Like during the whole COVID thing, I wish Republicans took this opportunity, never let a crisis go to waste, to give each family a check that was going to the public school, but instead now goes to you, the parent, so you can decide what to do with your child's education. I wish Republicans used this opportunity to bring in school choice. Even as the public schools were closed, they still couldn't make this happen. They are pathetic. So to be fair, again, if the nation and the world were more conservative, then I would take this opportunity to reset a lot of things as well towards conservative and traditional values and policies. But alas, progressives aren't in charge. We live in a modern era. There's no such thing as truth. And all things, because it's progressive, right? So all things new are by definition better and truer. That's an important sentence. We talked about that a couple weeks ago with C.S. Lewis, because he rejected that too in his day. This idea that all things newer are by definition better and truer. And I do not believe that that is true. So the left's going to charge ahead, truth and consequences be damned. So this is from the front page of the World Economic Forum website. Again, I just want to be clear, this is not like, I didn't get this from an email from some Nigerian prince or something. This is like their thing. The COVID-19 crisis and the political, economic, and social disruptions it has caused is fundamentally changing the traditional context for decision making. Check this sentence out. The inconsistencies, inadequacies, and contradictions of multiple systems, from health and financial to energy and education, are more exposed than ever amidst a global context of concern for lives, livelihoods, and the planet. That's all. They're just concerned about your livelihood. But this is what progressives do, right? They see multiple systems as a bad thing. Progressives, Democrats, they see our 50 states as a bad, inefficient thing. It's wasteful, right? We just need everyone to be on the same page. We just need everyone to be the same, think the same, dress the same, and just have one. We just need one giant thing, bureaucracy, government, to just be in charge of it all. It'll be so much, it'll just be streamlined. It'll just be streamlined. No joke, the Democrats here, like we don't need to go to global elites. Democrats here, they don't want a federal government. They want a national government. See the difference? It's much simpler that way. Right? I mean, think about it. Just health, there's so many different levels, right? I mean, you have like local hospitals, right? But who wants local people in charge of local issues? We need the WHO in charge of everyone's health. It'll just be so much easier that way, right? Conservatives and our founders, they saw the wisdom in having many systems. That's why we have 50 states, each with their own system. And the globalists hate that. This is under the section called Opportunity. We enter a unique window of opportunity, goody, to shape the recovery. This initiative will offer insights to help inform all those determining the future state of global relations, the direction of national economies. Good, that's what I want. I want I want a globalist government focusing on the direction of this economy. The priorities of societies, the nature of business models. Isn't that amazing that we're gonna have global elites coming up with the priority of our society? The nature of business models and the management of the global commons, drawing from the vision and the vast expertise of the leaders engaged across the forum's communities. The Great Reset Initiative has a set of dimensions to build a new social contract that honors the dignity of every human being. When global leaders start talking about the dignity of every human being, run. Or better yet, fight back. It's a trap. Don't fall for it. They don't care about your dignity. But people fall for this. Come on, global commons, the vast expertise. COVID's our unique window of opportunity. Now, lest you think I'm going off the deep end here, if there's anyone who's like, oh, Slater, come on, you're blowing this all out of proportion. To achieve a better outcome, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies. How many aspects? All the aspects. From education to social contracts. Again, that's such a we got to get more detail on the social contracts. And working conditions. From every country, from the US to China, must participate. And every industry, oil, gas, tech, must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. See how that works there? The great reset of capitalism. Do you see the judo move? They're not going to say, in short, we need communism. Right? That's not going to work. They're smarter than that. In short, they're going to say, we need a reset of capitalism. And people are going to be like, oh, yeah, capitalism, that's great. Yeah, let's do that. They have no intention. Like, they're not a bunch of Adam Smith, Henry Hazlitt, Milton Friedmans over there being like, hey, you know what, let's get back to real, true free markets. No, of course not. Who thinks that? You trust these people to reset capitalism? They're judoing it, right? Everyone said, we need more capitalism. They're like, we'll take your capitalism, and they usher us right into communism. Here's another good one. One silver lining of the pandemic is that it's shown how quickly we can make radical changes to our lifestyles. Yeah, you told us that if we go to work, we're all going to die. Okay? That's why we quickly changed our lifestyles. And also you said if we go to work, we're going to fine you and send you to jail. Right? Well, it's like, wow, look how quickly people change their lifestyles. How encouraging. It's amazing. If we just strong-arm people and threaten them with jail time, and of course they're going to die and shame them into killing grandma, people will change their ways. Unbelievable. They'll make radical changes to their lifestyles. Almost instantly, the crisis forced businesses and individuals to, isn't that funny? The crisis forced. No, you did. To abandon practices long claimed to be essential, from frequent air travel to working in an office. Likewise, populations have overwhelmingly shown a willingness to make sacrifices. Clearly, the will to build a better society does exist. No, I don't think people had a will to build a better society. I think you tricked people into having a will to not die. That was their will. I'm not going to go to work because I don't want to die, because everyone tells me I'm going to die if I go to work, and I don't want to die. And they're going to spin that as, see, everyone loves communism. Oh, I'm sorry. The reset of capitalism. We must use it to secure the great reset that we so badly need. Okay? This is from their website. I didn't make this up. And no wonder the left hates Trump so much. Trump was a nationalist, maybe more than anything. And this is true for, you go back to like Trump interviews in the 80s, and he was a nationalist, putting America first. He said, we're going to put America's interests first. And by the way, France, you should put your interests first. I don't blame you. And China, I don't blame you guys for listen, you manipulate your currency or whatever, like, I get it. We don't like it, but I get it. Good for you. You're putting your interests first. But now that we're all not lying to each other or ourselves anymore, and we're all putting our own interests first, and we're honest about it, now we can come together and figure out where those interests align and how we can work this out in ways that are best for everyone, right? It's so funny. People on the left think that nationalism, right? They hear nationalism and they think, oh, you want to bomb everyone. Clearly, nationalists want to just bomb all the countries in the world, even though Trump ended wars around the world, right? But they think we want to bomb everyone, or they think nationalism means hating every other country. No, of course not. Nationalism is an honest starting point of our priorities. And then you can negotiate from there. And I believe that is the best way to help people around the world. It's one of these things. If you're looking for universal brotherhood among the nations, you don't start by doing what's best for the world, right? You're never going to achieve it that way. You start with doing what's best for your nation, or thinking that way. What would be best for this nation and the people in this nation? And if everyone does that, then you have a starting point on where you guys can come together, because working with other countries is also in our best interest as a nation. Make sense? And that is a fundamental difference of how to achieve world peace. It's just an analogy. We got to run because we got a great guest coming up. But same thing with peace in the Middle East, right? John Kerry, Joe Biden, Obama, they thought the way to achieve peace in the Middle East was to first get Israel and the Palestinians to come to peace, and then the rest of the Arab world will follow. And Trump and Kushner, they came in and said, no. First, we're going to get peace between Israel and the Arab world. Then these nations will get the Palestinians to follow. So two completely different approaches, and it's the Trump way that worked. Okay, he'll never get credit for it, ever, but it's the Trump way that worked. And it's the same thing here. How do you achieve universal peace and brotherhood among nations? You don't do that. You don't well, what does everyone else want? No, you start with what you want. Set your priorities first. Then you can go out from that starting point and start to negotiate and figure out what's best for everyone. Make sense? So the question is, do you think Biden's going to push back against any of this globalist vision? And globalism is the ultimate kicking the can down the road for progressives, right? So conservatives believe in localism, right? You start first, the concentric circles of responsibility that we talk about all the time. Start first with yourself, as Jordan Peterson says, clean your own room. Then your family, then your community, then your nation, and then the world, right? You go this way. Progressives, the left, they believe in globalism first. I'm a citizen of the world, right? And then maybe they work themselves in, but really they never make it very far, but they just kick the responsibility further and further away from themselves. And there's nothing, you can't kick it any further than the UN or the WHO and trying to put them in charge of things that only free individual people can actually do for themselves. So a ton here, and I look forward to Jesse's special tomorrow, but just the most fundamental point of all, is it a conspiracy if it's on the front page of the World Economic Forum's website? True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So we didn't spend any time on this because it's stupid, but Time Person of the Year, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Who cares? But I want to use that as a launching pad to who are definitely the people of the year. I want to tell the story of how we came up with this vaccine. So it usually takes decades to come up with a vaccine, if ever. But the Pfizer vaccine was developed in a few hours by these two, Aslam Tureki and Ugur Sahin. He was born in Turkey, right on the Syrian border. His dad was a car factory worker. She was born in Turkey, wanted to be a nun. They both immigrated to Germany. They're married. And they started a company. This is their second company, BioNTech. And they've been working on trying to help the immune system fight tumors. And one day, Ugur read about this weird virus in China. It was on January 24th. He read this article, this medical journal, with the title, "A Familial Cluster of Pneumonia Associated with the 2019 Novel Coronavirus Indicating Person-to-Person Transmission, a Study of a Family Cluster." Very exciting read. That's what he read. And the thing that really stood out to him was the potential of asymptomatic spread. He's like, ooh, that's a problem. Then he looked up this place, Wuhan, and found out how connected this place is with the rest of the world through air travel, primarily to Italy. Why Italy? There's a section of Italy where all the garment fashion factories are. And all those factories recently have been bought by Chinese companies in Wuhan. There were direct flights daily between Wuhan and these different cities in Italy. Crazy, right? So he saw the asymptomatic spread. He saw the connection with Wuhan and the rest of the world, particularly Italy. And he said, oh, this is a big problem. This is going to be a global pandemic. He saw this on January 24th. So he went back to his work. He had 1,000 employees. He said, all right, everyone, stop what we're doing. We're now focused on this. He called it the Lightspeed Project. They didn't do it for money. That couple, they sold their last company for $1.7 billion, so they were fine. Right now, their company, BioNTech's worth $26 billion, if not more, right? This was their mission. This was like their moral duty to save the world. They had the skills to do it, the expertise, the knowledge, the wisdom, the scientific ability to do it, and we're gonna put all hands on deck to do it. In one weekend, they said it took them a few hours. They came up with 10 different candidates. He did this on his computer, like whatever that even means, 10 different candidates for what the vaccine should look like. They picked 2 of them for the larger trials, and one of those 2 is the one that we have today. What? So I just want to be clear about this. Days, and I'm not going to make this a political thing about how the media, when Trump kept saying, oh, by the end of the year, by the end of the year, by the end of the year, and they're like, you're an idiot, you're an idiot, you're an idiot. And they would ask all these vaccine people, and the vaccine people were like, oh, it would take a miracle, it's going to be more than a year, if ever, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, the media never asked these 2. Because if you asked these two, they would have been like, oh yeah, I came up with it in a couple hours. Yeah, we already got it. We just got to test it now. But yeah, I made it up in a few hours. We're good to go. Right? Which would have been a very different story. Days after he heard about this virus, days after he told everyone in the office he was going to make a vaccine, they had it. Now here's the thing though, they were small, couple thousand people. They didn't have the capacity to do all the trials. So they called up Pfizer and the head of vaccine research, her name's Catherine Jansen, right? Evil big pharma. They've worked together before. They worked together on a flu vaccine a couple of years back, 2018. So Pfizer was going to be in charge of manufacturing, batches, and running the trials and the logistics of the whole operation, everything. So now this leads us, and maybe we can do this more another day, into a whole story about Pfizer and how they were able to pull this logistical hurdle off, right? So BioNTech and these German doctors, they designed it, but Pfizer had their massive role. They had to make the vaccine, but they didn't have the ability to produce mRNA. They didn't do that. So they had to start from scratch to make this happen quickly. How about this sentence right here? Check this out. This is the Wall Street Journal. To assemble its mRNA production network, Pfizer used its own money and did not take any money from the federal government. Executives said they did not want to give agencies outside of the FDA more leverage over the design of their trials, right? So they didn't take any federal money for this part. Rival Moderna, which took funding from a division of the Health and Human Services, suffered a 3-week delay in completing its own mRNA trial after federal officials there asked the company to slow down enrollment of the trial volunteers to boost the racial and ethnic diversity of study subjects. Are you kidding me? So Pfizer said, we don't want any federal money because we don't want you guys telling us how we're going to do this. Moderna said, yeah, we'll take your money. And what did they get? They got some like race quota that they had to meet. Held it back by 3 weeks. Isn't that incredible? We'll spend more time on that later. So Pfizer, they originally, right out of the chute, they spent $500 million, $500 million, which was double their original budget for this process. And they built a factory, or they transformed a factory in Andover, Massachusetts, and St. Louis. And one day we got to do another segment on these machines. The machines that they built to do this, they're the size of a one-car garage. Each machine cost $200 million to make. 200 each one. They bought 7. Right? Then, on top of this, the regulators in Europe and US, they wanted the trials not to have 8,000 people like they originally intended, but 30,000. So they had to 3-4x their supply as quickly as possible. And the Pfizer executive and the lower people are like, you got to make this happen. And the people down the bottom are like, we can't do this. Like, there's no way we can do this. How are we possibly? And they had 2 vaccines at the time they were still trying. So they had we can't make it happen. They also have a factory in Belgium, right? The engineers in Belgium, and I would love to get to the bottom of this story. I would love to talk to these engineers. They figured out how to squeeze. First of all, they figured out how to make the machines work faster. And they figured out how to squeeze one extra machine into the facility in order to make this happen. And they called the boss up and said, hey, it's going to cost $10 million. And the boss said, yeah, just do it. I would love to talk to those engineers. Like, what an unsung position they had. Like, what was the original layout of the factory? And like, how did you fit this extra machine in? And like, just amazing stories here. Then a whole nother team at Pfizer had to figure out how to keep these things at least negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit. So they are working with other companies and contractors to build these boxes that hold 5,000 doses each. And they finally figured it out, right? And they figured it out and they tested it by sending these boxes to different employees' houses across the country, right? So they're so excited, right? We got these engineers, we got these logistics people. They came up with the box that's going to be able to hold these vaccines and save the world. It's great. So they presented it to the head of Pfizer. And the head of Pfizer said, what the hell is CVS going to do with 5,000 doses? Right? Could you imagine? So the engineer guys are like, back to the drawing board. And now we have smaller boxes with 125 doses instead of the 5,000. There's like amazing stories here that we're just scratching the surface with. And we're definitely going to be sharing more of these. The fact that we have Turkish immigrants in Germany and the partnership that they have with an American company, this is an incredible success story of medicine and science and technology and engineering. And the press gives Person of the Year to Joe Biden, all to dunk on Trump. What an absolute bunch of hacks. And what a story as well. We got to go here, but what an example of just the media just giving up on their obligation, their duty to the American people to be genuine, legitimate people. Instead, they just have to be hacks and jerks nonstop. Give it to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to dunk on Trump instead of giving these two scientists and many other engineers. And there's so many stories to share here that could have been shared, but instead weren't because anything to dunk on Trump. Amazing. All right, so we are not going to fall for it, and we're going to talk a lot more about the story behind this vaccine. All right, coming up next, I want to talk about advancing boldly, what conservatives need to do moving forward, and we can look to Florida as an amazing lesson for that. We'll do that next. True story, Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I love this line from our next guest. It's so simple, but it encapsulates everything that we need to do as conservatives moving forward. Advance boldly. Dr. Robert McClure, he's the president of the James Madison Institute in Florida. Dr. McClure, how are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Matt, my pleasure. Good to talk to you. So you're in Florida. Florida was an incredible success story for conservatives. What happened? What lessons do we need to learn as conservatives nationwide?
Well, if you look at a state like Florida, you have roughly 1,000 people moving here a day. You have a demographic that reflects the entire country. It's one of the most dynamic states in the entire country. And so when the left says demographics are destiny, it's not what they think. Florida proves that if you have a conservative message and you can get to those demographics, they'll vote for conservatives, Hispanics, African Americans, male, female. You know how the left likes to divide us by a demographic. Actually, everybody wants a better life for themselves and for their children and for their grandchildren. And we saw that in Florida on election night.
Yeah, I like this idea of demographics of destiny because I've been discouraged by this in the past because it's a compelling argument on the surface. So what is their argument that demographics is destiny?
Well, the left argues that somehow because someone is a particular demographic, they're ultimately going to vote for the current Democratic Party. And that's big government, more government services. And that's just simply not true. And we've seen that here in Florida. You know, you look at the growth of small businesses here. You look at the dynamic areas of the state like Miami and parts of Naples and those areas where millennials are thriving. You look at issues like low taxation, fewer regulations, school choice is a huge issue. And it doesn't matter what the demographic is. Governor Ron DeSantis won 20% of the African-American female vote in his election. That's 100,000 votes. He wins the entire race by 30,000 votes. Wow. President Trump did extremely well. It didn't matter what the demographic was. And it's about issues. Everybody wants a better life for themselves and their children and their grandchildren. It's the American dream writ large here in the Sunshine State.
Give me an example of how Florida has advanced boldly, right? Because maybe even there may be some times where a Republican moves forward on a policy or something, but it's very mealy-mouthed, it's very apologetic. It's very like, oh, you know, blah, blah. What is like a bold, unapologetic policy that Republicans in Florida have stood for?
School choice is the poster child for that. And that is the opportunity for parents to choose the best form of schooling for their children and in many cases their grandchildren, whether it's homeschooling, online, tax credit scholarship programs. The state of Florida has more school choice programs than any other state in the country. They have more children participating in those programs. And in fact, nearly half, almost half of all school-age children participate in some form of school choice. And that's a staggering statistic. And it cuts across demographic lines. It doesn't matter who you are. You want the best education for your children and for your grandchildren. And it's a winning issue for conservatives, regardless of demographic.
It is the lowest hanging fruit of all. It's insane to me that Republicans don't grab more onto this and make this the forefront of everything. And actually, we talked about it earlier a little bit in passing with COVID and how the Republicans couldn't use this crisis to usher in school choice when the schools were closed. Like, this would have been an amazing time to do it, and they still couldn't even do it. So what's the hesitation with just that issue, and maybe even in general with conservatives?
Well, I don't know that conservatives always articulate their principles as well. You know, the left has, as I always like to say, the left has the easy argument. We have the right argument. So the left is saving the children, saving the oceans, saving the world. We're 30 seconds into our dissertation about taxation and regulation and property rights, and people's eyes glaze over. And so the ability to articulate the issue and crystallize it for Americans, we've been able to do that in the state of Florida. Governor Jeb Bush did it 30 years ago. We've been able to have tremendously bold conservative leadership in the state since then, and it doesn't matter what the demographic is. People want freedom, they want opportunity, and they want their ability to chase the American dream, and we've seen that happen here in Florida.
Speak more to the structural disparity between a progressive's argument and a conservative's argument, right? Like, we can just do this issue, right? You mentioned the left's like, oh, we want to help the children. Why does that work? And the conservative argument of, oh, we do too, doesn't seem to resonate as quickly.
Well, I mean, you know, it's like saying you're from mom and apple pie. We want to help the children. Well, everybody wants to help the children. And so there is this, but the reality is, school choice is the perfect example and opportunity for the left to not kowtow to teacher union bosses who fill their coffers when they run for office, but to actually do something for the children. And here in Florida, we've seen that that's a winning political issue because it's actually advancing opportunity and choice for parents and for children. And so while the left, you know, falls back on old tropes and trite expressions, conservatives are actually advancing issues. You look at what the president did with the courts. You look at what Betsy DeVos tried to do with education. You look at what the president did with the cutting of taxes and those kinds of things. When you're able to do those kinds of things, people will listen and they'll turn out to vote for you. We've seen that time and time again here in Florida.
You say advance boldly. The left is very good at advancing boldly. I mean, we just did a segment about the World Economic Forum's website, The Great Reset, right? That's a pretty bold advancement. What are some things you see from the left coming that will be bold?
Well, they've got an ambitious agenda, and I think January 5th in Georgia is going to be an interesting race to find out just how much and how far they can move. I don't think it's all doom and gloom if they sweep those two seats for reasons we can talk about. But I do think that they are going to advance on climate. The president-elect is already talking about rejoining the Paris Accords. I think you're going to continue to see them advance in areas where you continue to grow government at the state and national level. You know, the system, the Constitution is designed to protect states from an ever-growing, ever-burgeoning federal government. And yet we've kind of lost our way in the last 80 to 100 years, where now somehow the states rely on the federal government. And I think you're going to continue to see that happen in housing, in banking, in financial services, certainly in, you know, climate issues and those kinds of things. And the left is going to continue to grow government because, as we know, once government is grown, and Obamacare is the most recent example, but there are many examples. Once it's kind of codified, it's very difficult to get rid of. It's like Ronald Reagan said, you know, the nearest thing to eternal life on earth is a government program. And so the more the left can advance boldly and codify those kinds of issues, the more difficult it will be for conservatives to kind of reduce government over time.
Yeah. And so I think was it Milton Friedman who said there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program? I like that line too.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Let's last question for you. You mentioned, let's say the Democrats win or cheat. You know what I'm saying, Doctor? In Georgia. Why do you think it's not all doom and gloom? I don't either, but what's your argument?
Well, I think what you're going to see is the center probably holds. You look at blue state Republicans, red state Democrats, or even red state Republicans like Lisa Murkowski and Mitt Romney. I think you're going to see this tremendous power come from folks like Joe Manchin, red state Democrat in West Virginia, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Mitt Romney. Maybe even Ron Johnson, although he's been pretty strong as a conservative in a relatively blue state. And I think you're going to see, those 3 to 5, 4 to 6 different senators who are going to have tremendous power going forward. Now, who knows how the race will turn out on January 5th, but I don't think if it's a 50-50 split that you're going to have the left able to advance boldly, as we've discussed, the issues that they want to do. What people don't realize is except for the presidential race, conservatism had a big night on November 3rd, down ballot. They were predicted to lose seats in the House. They closed the gap to roughly 10 to 15 seats. Nancy Pelosi barely held on to her majority. They were predicted to be swept out of the Senate. They hold the majority and probably will win 1 or 2 of the seats on January 5th. All at the state level, they did extremely well, and that's going to have consequences for redistricting going forward in a whole host of different states. Conservatism won the night on Tuesday. It just happened to be at the presidential level. They didn't, and that's where people are focusing, and yet there's a lot of good news to take away from November 3rd.
I think that's right. We've said if you had to pick one of the 2 parties to be in right now, like position-wise, I'd want to be in the Republican seat as opposed to the Democrats. I think that's right.
And,
Dr. Robert, sorry, go ahead, last thought.
Last thought, conservatives need to understand that their policies work and people are dying and hungry for their policies, but the articulation of those policies and the advancing of them boldly is critically important. Policies are good politics, and they can win elections with the issues of the day.
Do it unafraid, unapologetically, advance boldly. Dr. Robert McClure, James Madison Institute. Grateful that you and the Institute are here. Appreciate you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day. Tomorrow, we got our special. We're going to talk about Christian persecution in America, Christian persecution around the world, and Christian persecution in history. It's all coming up tomorrow. Mike Slater, spread the word.